quick run through. Ini yang bila saya sebut tentang lizard hole tu, ada hadis Rasulullah SAW, dia kata, you will surely follow the path trodden by those before you, step by step and inch by inch, so much so that if they went down into a lizard hole, you would follow them. Sahabat-sahabat bertanya, Ya Rasulullah, do you mean the Jews and the Christians when you said those before you? Rasulullah kata, who else? Jadi persoalannya, is this applicable just to riba? No, he didn't say this just on the riba issue in general, dia kata. But the same thing is happening in the banking system. Bila kita kata, oh, we now have Islamic banking, are we really different, or are we actually going deeper into the rabbit hole? This is the question that I want you to ask yourself when you see some of these issues. Tadi kita tunjuk this is why this is an extension of 1913 onwards tadi. So dulu wang was just gold and silver, and then kalau tengok 1778 tu is the Spanish currency, they were doing that. Then in 1791 the first bank of the US was set up, but they were given only almost a 20-year license saja, so they were closed. Then 1816 the second bank of US was set up, also given a certain grace period, because masa tu some of the people in the US, the presidency and all that, was not agreeable to having this system. So in 1832, when Andrew Jackson became the president, he vetoed the extension of the second bank of US. Dia tak setuju. Sebab he understood, even in 1832, he understood the problems with banking system. So he stops depositing government funds into the bank, and in 1835 there was an assassination attempt on Jackson. Some attribute this to the powers at that point of time were not happy because he was not did not extend the license. In 1862, President Lincoln also starts government issues their own money, which is not through the banking system. Of course, during that time and today, there's some slight differences. Okay, and as we all know, President Lincoln was also assassinated. Was it truly related? Some say yes, it was related, but some say no. Then President Garfield, he is a strong advocate of honest money. Bila kata honest money, money backed by gold and silver. He was assassinated in 1881. Then kalau kita lihat, in 1908 there was a banking panic or crisis in the US, and in November 1910, some of these bankers met up in Jekyll Island in the US to propose the setting up of the Federal Reserve Bank. Sebelum tu tidak ada Federal Reserve Bank. Dan bila kita sebut, the name was purposely selected as Federal Reserve because bila orang dengar Federal Reserve, orang rasakan, oh, it belongs to the government. But if you look at the shareholder of Federal Reserve Bank, you have some of the big banks, 10 big banks as shareholders of the Federal Reserve Bank. So in 1913, the Federal Reserve Bank Act was passed. A couple of months after the Federal Reserve Bank Act was passed, the Income Tax Act was passed. Why? Because they knew that since the government cannot print the money and the Federal Reserve will be printing the money, then the government will need to borrow the money. When they need to borrow the money, they have to pay back. So how does the government pay back? What is the asset, the real asset of the government? Yes, they have the resources and all that, but the real asset are the people. Because it is the people who work, kata-kata labor tadi. You can have all the resources. Macam bila bumi sebelum Nabi Adam diturunkan, bumi dah ada dah. All the resources were already there. But you need the brain and the manpower to work on it. So you tax the people who's working on it. So when you tax, it is also to pay the whatever loan the government is taking. So the Income Tax Act was approved soon after the Federal Reserve Bank Act was approved. 1914, Federal Reserve Bank was opened. Then there was a period they panggil easy money. It was about 1918 onwards, a period of easy money. And so in 1929, there was a contraction of the money supply by the Federal Reserve Bank. So what happens when the bank do not tidak memberi pinjaman? What happens? There's a contraction of the economy. Economy cannot grow. Kalau for instance, which is why developers have to have got to have strong relationship with the banks, because you buat project, tapi kalau tak ada buyers, tak ada financing for that project, siapa nak beli rumah tu? So when they contracted the money supply, of course some people question this. Betul ke dia contract money supply? I will prove this to you. So that created the US Great Depression from 1929 to 1939. So kalau kita baca US punya economic history, it is very well known that during this period there was the US Great Depression. So dulu people don't know what was the real cause. Then Milton Friedman, which is a Nobel Prize winner in economics from Stanford University, dia kata, this is in his book, dia kata, the Federal Reserve definitely caused the Great Depression. It is the banking system that caused the Great Depression. By contracting America's money supply by 1/3 between 1929 and 1933. That means dia tak keluarkan duit. Oh, then of course some people will say, kalau macam tu, the bank is important. Yeah, they have a role to play. But then kita kena faham, we're talking about issue of riba, whether the current Islamic banking system, is moving in the right direction or not. These are the issues. That's why kita kena buka ni dulu. Sebelum kita discuss this issue about whether perbankan Islam itu sebenar-benarnya lain daripada sistem kewangan sekarang. So some people did not agree with Milton Friedman punya conclusion. But when in 2002, Ben Bernanke, who was the president of Federal Reserve Bank, apa dia kata? Dia kata in 2002 made this startling admission in a speech given in honor of Friedman's 90th birthday. I would like to say to Milton and Anna regarding the Great Depression, you are right, we did it, we are sorry. So, we are sorry. So these are facts, but the question is, berapa orang yang nak baca benda ni? Kita nak mengubah manusia ni, kalau kita tengok, perbezaan kita hanya pada ilmu. Bila kita buat sesuatu keputusan berdasarkan pada ilmu yang kita ada. So the more we read on the areas of our own expertise, the more we begin to understand what the issues are, and then we make our decision. So macam credit creation, I urge the Syariah scholars to understand credit creation. So because of that, you tengok this last ni, because of that Great Depression, the government do not allow the citizens to hold gold. Because before that, the government told the American people that, look, the country is in dire need because of the economic situation. Just place your gold with the Federal Reserve Bank. For every ounce you give, we'll give you $20. But bila 1933 came, dia kata, nope, it's illegal for you to hold gold now. So if you hold gold, then you can be jailed for 10 years. So why? So surely there is some value in gold, which they understand that many of us may not properly understand. So ini saja besarkan. This is the executive order of 6102. Dia kata, was signed in 1933 by US President Franklin Roosevelt, President of the US 1933 to 1945, forbidding the hoarding of gold coins, gold bullion, gold certificates within the confinement of the United States. The act transferred the ownership of all monetary gold in the US to the US Treasury and prohibited the Treasury and financial institutions from redeeming dollars for gold. Because sebelum tu, you ada mata wang, boleh tukar pada emas. So from that day onwards, there's no more exchange of paper to gold. Then we have, after that, they had the World War II. So what happened after World War II? In 1944, towards the end of World War II, they called the governments, the leaders of the countries, various countries, to meet up in Bretton Woods, basically to discuss the setting up of the United Nations. And part of the discussion of setting up the United Nations was to set up the monetary system and the IMF. So during the discussion of Bretton Woods in 1944, they agreed to peg the gold, 1 ounce of gold, to $35. So all countries around the world will have to keep their gold with the US. You keep your gold with the US, and then US will price it at $35 for every ounce, meaning that for every ounce, US can only print 35 pieces of $1 notes. So everybody agreed, generally. Then what happened was, America went to war in Vietnam, in Korea, in some of the parts of the world. So because of that, they need more equipments. They need more military equipment. So what they did quietly was to print more money than the agreed $35. So assuming they printed an additional 35, that means $70 to 1 ounce of gold already. Which means that the $1 is no more $1, the value, purchasing power dia dah jadi 50 cents. So, but the rest of the world tak tahu. Bila dia tak tahu, America has the advantage because they have more money in hand, paper money, when they can purchase more things. So, but later, France, England, and Germany came to know that US was printing more than what they should. So they started, and during that period, there is what is called a gold window. You can, with whatever US dollars that you have, you can exchange it for gold. Because that was the agreement during Bretton Woods. Yeah? So some countries begin to withdraw their gold until there was no more gold. So when there is no more gold, what is the value of the dollar? Practically zero. So in 1971, when some Americans went to Italy for holiday, US dollars was not accepted. They didn't want to accept US dollar. And this is banyak sangat orang tak tahu benda ni. Kan? So because of that, and kalau tengok ni, you tengok sini, the one that I circled in red, yeah, $1 silver payable to bearer on demand, $100 in gold coins, which means that for every dollar that you hold, you can exchange for gold during that time. And Alhamdulillah, you know, when I was in London, I was attending a program in New York, and one of it was to visit the Federal Reserve Bank, and we went to, they brought us to the vault where dia tunjuk di mana mereka simpan emas-emas ni dulu, and bagaimana mereka bila towards end of the year dia kata balance of trade payment apa semua ni, bagaimana they move the balance of gold from this country to this country dalam the different vaults for each country macam tu in New York. Yeah. So we watch a little bit of video. Sini kau tengok. Ada? Oh, lain lah.
Le fait que beaucoup d'États acceptent par principe des dollars au même titre que de l'or pour les règlements des différences qui existent à leur profit dans la balance des paiements américaine, ce fait entraîne les Américains à s'endetter et à s'endetter gratuitement vis-à-vis de l'étranger, car ce qu'ils lui doivent, ils le lui payent, tout au moins en partie, avec des dollars qu'il ne tient qu'à eux d'émettre. Étant donné les conséquences que pourrait avoir une crise qui surviendrait dans un pareil domaine, nous pensons qu'il faut prendre à temps les moyens de l'éviter. Nous estimons nécessaire que les échanges internationaux soient établis, comme c'était le cas avant les grands malheurs du monde, sur une base monétaire indiscutable et qui ne porte la marque d'aucun pays en particulier.
The standard criteria.
Quelle base?
So this was in 1960 something.
Qu'il puisse y avoir.
So masa tu dia orang tak agree lah, because US has the advantage of printing money, you know, at their own whims. Okay, so then there was a closure of the gold window because everybody, all the various countries started to withdraw their punya gold. So came to President Nixon. President Nixon put stop to the to the withdrawal of the gold window. So this was, ini saja saya copy balik apa yang dia kata, because tadi dia baca dalam bahasa apa, bahasa French. Okay, the next one is another video that I want to show. This is called the Nixon shock. 15th August after the closure of the gold window, which means that US dollar becomes just pure paper saja. That's when we stop the gold backing, gold reserve. Yeah. But then Amerika ni apa pun dia smart lah. Dia smart. Lepas tu dia hantar Henry Kissinger pergi jumpa Saudi. Yeah. Bila pergi jumpa Saudi, what was discussed with Saudi was to Saudi to convince OPEC to sell oil only in US dollar. So bila Saudi agree to do that, anybody who wants to buy oil, katalah Malaysia nak beli minyak, Malaysia kena bayar US dollar. Malaysia tak ada US dollar. So mana Malaysia nak dapat US dollar? Or any other country, mana nak dapat US dollar? Dia kena pergi the US investment banks and borrow the dollars. It gives a boom to the investment banking industry. Because everybody around the world nak beli nak guna minyak. And if you buy from these countries, you have to use US dollar. So US dollar strengthens its position because you cannot buy oil in any other currencies. So suddenly there's a great demand for US dollars balik. So they control the world. So now, if you read another book called The Protocols of Zion, or you read The International Jew, of course the Zionists will say that these are fabricated lies. But if you look at the history, the historical developments from that book, your perspective, all the things that is mentioned in the book has happened years after. Years after. And I just want to mention, because this is critical for you to know also, 4 benda yang dia mention dalam buku tu, for those who have not read. Dia kata number 1, control media. And this book was written according to the International Jew tu. I also have a copy of the Protocols of Zion. It was written in 1904, around that. The meeting of the first Zionist movement by Theodore Herzl was set in Basel. Why is Basel important? Basel is the center of banking in your framework. When you are in banking, every a few years you will be getting an updated Basel framework. Why does it come from Basel? I mean, those days I never understood this until I read the book. So there is someone controlling this, this framework about banking, which is outside of even our own central bank. Yeah, and Basel is a special position. You just cannot go to because there's a place, a bank there that's called the Bank of International Settlement, BIS. And on top of that, all the SWIFT payment system all goes through them. So then you see that, this is co-managed. It is not what we see. So kalau kita hanya membuat kerja, duduk kat meja and just do, we don't see this big issue about how the rest of the world is being controlled by this monetary system. Yeah, so are we truly free in that sense? Kalau Malaysia, I've been involved in some discussions which I cannot disclose. Even, the powers that be in the country risau sebab kalau they don't agree, they just block kita punya SWIFT payment system. There's no money in and out of the country. There's just one SWIFT saja. So, the economy can collapse because of that. So anyway, petrodollar comes in, and after that, crisis after crisis that we've been seeing. Yeah. And the last one was 2008. This is the petrodollar. The benefits of the petrodollar is only to the US. There's another video, I don't know whether you'll be able to see this. Yeah.
I'm a baby boomer. I was born just after the war. We've probably had the longest period of peace and prosperity globally, I would say, from that time. I've put a little bit of modest money away so I can hand something down to my family when I pass on, largely because I've never spent more money than I've earned, and I've been prudent, and I've worked moderately hard. Now, it always seems to me as a complete surprise to politicians how countries get in debt. Let me explain, because I don't think you really understand it. It's because politicians consistently spend more money than they raise in taxation, more money than they can possibly raise in taxation, most of which, in point of fact, they actually waste. The reason we're talking about countries which are broke, and they are broke, is because their ridiculous, ineffective, ignorant politicians consistently spend more money than they can raise. And then they borrow, and worse, they then print money because politicians and their central banks have a machine which prints money. You do that as a private citizen, and it's a criminal offence. You would go to prison for doing that, and politicians and their central banks do it all the time. Let me explain to you that these countries are broke, and they're broke because of their own stupid leadership and politicians, and it's immoral to ask ordinary taxpayers of any country to pick up the tab for failed politicians and failed banks. They are defaulted, they're broke, for God's sake, let's all of us admit it.
So because of this monetary system that we have today, where
Mr. Bloom,
at least
yes,
around
well,
90-95%
thank
of
you
the
very
money
much.
is being created by the banks, just for their own profits, of course. We're facing this crisis every 10, 11 years or so.